subscribe.
This video is sponsored by PCBWay. More on them later in the video. If you've been around the channel for a bit, you'll likely know that I'm a huge fan of retro computers. In fact, I have an entire secondary channel dedicated to just reminiscing, repairing, and reviewing old technology. And if that's your jam, you can check out Print and Play Retrospective by clicking on the link in this video's description. So, it should come as no surprise that I'm a longtime follower of David Murray, aka the 8-Bit Guy. And when he said that he was building an arcade version of his game, Attack of the Petscii Robots, this gave me an idea. What about a 3D printed Petscii Robot arcade? So I emailed David my pitch and asked if he would be interested in a little collaboration, and he said he was game. And while it's taken some time to get here, I am thrilled with the way this cabinet turned out. I didn't want just another generic 3D printed arcade cabinet, and since 3D printing allows us to do all sorts of custom shapes, I thought, why not make the cabinet the actual robot from the cover art of the game? Although the parts aren't 100% to scale from the original drawings, I wanted to make sure I included as many of the details as possible. And I thought it would be awesome if the robot was actually holding out the arcade controls to the player. Of course, to give it the completed look I wanted, I needed to give it some destroy all humans energy. And I wanted to do this by building an animated eye screensaver to make it look more menacing. For the animation, I turned to my friend Mike, aka Never Let the Machines Win, who turned out a few animations based on what I had come up with, and I was able to take those and turn it into a screensaver that kicks in if the cabinet's idle for over a minute. I basically just gave him some ideas and he ran with them, so thanks, Mike. The display on this cabinet is an 8-inch 4x3 LCD that's capable of displaying resolutions of up to 1024 by 768. And it has a set of stereo speakers mounted underneath that passes audio through the grill in the mouth. And those bolts on the chest aren't just for show either. Turning the left one clockwise will turn the cabinet on and off, whereas the right one acts as volume control. Moving further down, we hit the control panel, which is being held in place by the robot's hands. I used the layout from David's original control panel in his Petscii Robots arcade video to make sure we had enough buttons and that they were all in the right places. When it came time to connect those controls and to power all the internal components, I designed some custom PCBs that I had made by the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. PCBWay is your one-stop shop for custom PCBs, electronics, 3D printing, CNC milling, and more. I was able to design my custom PCBs in my favorite CAD software, upload them to the PCB website so I could preview the design and make sure they looked alright, and then get them shipped to me ready to go. And you get 5 boards this size for just $5 plus shipping. But if it's your first time ordering, you get a $5 off coupon, making your order free plus shipping. In addition, if you don't have access to a 3D printer, PCBWay has you covered. Upload the models, pick the materials, and they'll print them and ship them right to you. If you've got a new electronics project coming up, make sure to check out PCBWay by clicking on the link in this video's description. The first custom board in this build is the same one I used in my last video, which allows you to take the Raspberry Pi Pico and have it act as multiple devices, including an arcade controller. If you missed that, I've included a link to the video in the description of this one, so you can check it out. With the custom electronics handled, it was time to pick a single board computer to be able to power the internals. Unfortunately, the Raspberry Pi is pretty difficult to find right now, and it's often overpriced when you do. So after finding my original Pi didn't have enough horsepower to do what I wanted it to, I finally settled on the Orange Pi PC, which was about a quarter of the price of a Raspberry Pi on Amazon at the time of filming this video. But I didn't want to have to reprint any large parts of the cabinet in the event I decided to switch to a Raspberry Pi in the future. So instead, I designed a mountable bracket that goes inside the cabinet that can hold the Orange Pi, and a separate one that could hold a Raspberry Pi. This way, if you want to switch later on, you can just print the other one for a part that only cost pennies to print. For the rear panel on the robot's head, I included a 4-color CGA version of the Petscii Robots logo. I did this by making the various parts of the logo different heights and then switching filaments as I was printing it so that each part would be a different color. Then, down lower on the main panel, I debossed both my logo and the 8-Bit Guy's logo onto it, and then switched filaments halfway through so the logos would appear as blue on gray, really making them pop. I had originally printed these panels in single colors, but then after seeing how they looked, I thought it was worth the extra effort to reprint them with multicolor, and I think it turned out way better. Also on the main rear panel, we have a 40mm fan grille that houses a Noctua fan which keeps things both cool and quiet. We also have a standard Ethernet port, since the Orange Pi PC lacks integrated Wi-Fi, and a single button that connects to my custom arcade controller that solves an interesting problem on this all-in-one cabinet. It allows my custom arcade controls to go from being a regular gamepad, which is compatible with consoles and arcade games, to being a keyboard input, which is compatible with the Amiga version of Attack of the Petscii Robots. And again, the tutorial where I built and coded that solution is included in the description of this video, so you can check it out if you want to build your own. Moving further down, we see that second custom PCB that gives us a DC barrel jack for connecting 5V in, as well as 3 functional USB ports. These can be used for connecting a keyboard or a mouse or a second gamepad if you want to do some 2-player games. All the parts for this cabinet were printed in various brands of PLA material and designed to fit onto the build surface of my Prusa Mark III's. So with this custom cabinet now wired, the question is, how well does it play? Well, starting off with one of the latest versions of Petscii Robots, the one for the Sega Genesis, I can say it plays really well. The controls are responsive, the audio gets loud but not deafeningly so, and the graphics look nice and sharp on this display. And I have to admit, I really love the startup sound for this game. This is definitely one of the better ports of the game, of which there are quite a few to choose from. Then it was time to test the version of the game that inspired this project. David was gracious enough to send me over the Amiga arcade version, and after tweaking the emulator, adding the Kickstart ROMs in, I got it running really well. The controls again are nice and responsive, the music sounds fantastic, and while it couldn't go full screen, it did keep a proper aspect ratio, and that just made the game look even better. So overall, I would say mission accomplished for building a cabinet geared towards this game. Software-wise, this cabinet is powered by a derivative of RetroPie called RetroOrangePie, and as such, it has support for a lot of consoles and arcade games. So while this is definitely designed and targeted for Attack of the Petscii Robots on the Amiga, it can do a lot more than that. I loaded the Space Invaders clone, Moonbase, onto this machine since David recently acquired the cabinet for this game. In terms of arcade games, this one is pretty low power, so the requirements aren't that high and the cabinet has absolutely no problems emulating it. And really, you can load this type of build up with pretty much all your favorite games and have your entire collection in one spot. It'll handle pretty much anything up to the Nintendo 64. So, what happens next? Well, I'm going to do a little more software cleanup and a little more wiring cleanup in this cabinet, and then it's going to get packed up and start its long journey from Ontario, Canada, all the way to Texas in the United States. So hopefully it'll arrive there safe and sound, and David will love it as much as I love designing and building it. As for the design files and whatnot, I'll be releasing those free of charge shortly for anybody who wants to build their own version. And I didn't get too far into the build process in this video because I know that's not everybody's cup of tea. But if there's interest, I did record the entire build process, and I'd be happy to put out a tutorial on how to build your own. So let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, let me know down there what you'd like to see in the next build. Well, that's it for this one, but I want to say thanks again to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. And a huge thanks to all my Patreon supporters on the screen right now who help make this content possible. And finally, thanks to you for watching all the way to the end. I'll see you again soon.